This is an oral history interview conducted for the Witness to War Serving a Nation project at Nauset Regional High School on Cape Cod, Massachusetts. For the sake of this interview, please state your full name and the town in which you now reside.
Arthur Joseph Devine Howich.
Okay, so tell us about your childhood, your growing up.
I grew up in Lynn, Massachusetts, which is a population, back then had a population of about 93,000 people. It's a big city on the North Shore of Boston. Has a 3-mile ocean front. GE is there. 4 major high schools. I graduated from Lynn English, and that had 3,000 kids. We had 1,000 in my graduating class. So it was a big, plus we were baby boomers, so there was a lot of kids. And yeah, I grew up in Lynn, in the city.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a wonderful childhood. I had a lot of great friends and played sports and got in trouble, and I was a street urchin and not a very good student. I hated school, I have to say, until I went to college. But I came from a very large family, large families on both sides. My mother was one of 6 siblings, and my father was one of 7. And they all got married and had lots of kids, so I have 49 first cousins. And we all lived near each other. So we were troublemakers, and we had a lot of fun. Yeah.
Great. So you went to high school and then you went to college.
No, I went to high school. I wasn't going to college.
Oh,
my grades were barely passing. Yeah. So, no, I when I got out of high school, I actually played hockey for Lynn English. I was a goalie, senior varsity goalie. And I was scouted by BU, University of Maine, a couple other places. Some Ivy League schools. And they took one look at my grades and said, well, okay, next. So my choices back then during the Vietnam War, and I didn't even know anything about it. I was really a dumb street kid. If you asked me where Vietnam was on a map, I probably would have pointed to Cuba. I had no idea. But I knew there was a war going on, and I knew that there was a draft. And if I knew enough that if you got drafted, you went right into the infantry or artillery, or you became a cook. Those were your options. So if you enlisted, you could pick a school, and you could pick what you wanted to be, and you could do anything. You could be a radar repairman. You could be a cop. You could be whatever. You could go to officers training school and become an officer. So that's what I did. I enlisted so I wouldn't get drafted. But when you enlist, you go for 3 years. When you're drafted, you go for 2. And then 4 years inactive, because it's 6 years total. Your enlistment is 6 years.
So when you were a little kid, what did you want to be when you grew up? Like, did you see the military in your future? No, I didn't see military at all. I loved playing, we all played back then, cowboys and Indians, cops and robbers, army, we fought the Japanese in our backyard, we fought the Germans, and we took turns being Japanese and German and American. So we all played those games, but no, I didn't see myself in the military. My father was in World War II. He was in the Navy. He was on an aircraft carrier in the Pacific, got wounded. He was on the aircraft carrier Ticonderoga, which saw lots of action in the South Coral Sea, Midway, stuff like that. So no, and he was a fireman. So I kind of saw myself maybe being a fireman, but then when I saw his work, not so much. I wanted to play hockey. I wanted to be an athlete. I mean, I was an athlete. I ran track, I played football, baseball, everything. And I played music. I was in a band. Rock and roll. So you graduated high school and enlisted, and where did you go after that for training and everything?
I went to first I went to Fort Dix, New Jersey for basic training, which is 8 weeks. And most people after that, if they're in the infantry, they go to advanced infantry training. But I went to jump school because I had volunteered for parachuting. You have to be, it's called airborne. You have to go to jump school before they can let you into special forces. You have to be airborne qualified to get into special forces. And I wanted I wanted to go Special Forces. I wanted to be a Green Beret. I didn't know anything about it, but I just liked the uniforms.
So Green Beret, what does that mean? Like, could you explain that?
Green Beret back then was the most elite unit in the Army. Very highly specialized, trained guerrilla fighting, counterinsurgency tactics of how to take down the government, how to do all kinds of stuff. But mostly we were also teachers. We taught other countries how to defend themselves. So you had to be experts in your field of what you studied. So that was Special Forces. A teams are made up of 12 guys, and each one is cross-trained. So if I'm communications and you're a medic, you might be medic and light weapons. So if you get killed, you still have a medic. So there's always 2 of every MOS. So there's 6 MOSs. Military Occupation Specialty, MOS, is what you have. So I was light and heavy weapons and communications, which is radios and all that stuff.
Cool.
Yeah. So that's Special Forces is that. They have A teams, then they have strike forces, and then they also have what's called recon. I was in recon.
Mm-hmm. So you knew you wanted to be Green Beret from the beginning.
Yeah.
So is that why you chose the Army? Like,
well, it's funny. Actually, I didn't know that until I got in the Army and I saw the uniforms in the Army. I just went in the Army because I was trying to just get away from Lynn. That's a cat. I just wanted to get out of Lynn. I just wanted to get out of and go, just get out and do something with my life. And a buddy of mine, we were trying to get in the Air Force, but there was a waiting list. And every time we went to the post office, that's where the recruitment officers were, or sergeants. The guy in the Air Force says, 6-month waiting list and 6 months. And so we kept coming back. And finally, this sergeant sticks his head out. He had seen us coming there because they're all together, the Army, Marines. They're all on the same floor, second floor of the post office downtown Lynn. And he goes, "What are you guys doing?" And we go, "We're trying to get in the Air Force. We want to go in the Air Force." He goes, come down here. His name was Sergeant Calvary. I'll never forget it. He goes, "Why do you want to go in the Air Force?" "Because we want to get out of Lynn." I can get you out of here Monday. What? "Yeah, you can go in the buddy plan. You can go together." He said, "Really?" "Yeah, so sign your name." And so we signed our name on a Friday, and we were gone on Monday. We went out into South Boston Army Base, and we were gone. So no, I didn't. Then when I got to the basic, I saw these guys. They did a demonstration of parachuting. I go, "Wow, that's cool." And then they showed these guys walking around with green berets and their fatigues, and they had all this stuff. And I go, "Oh, that's what I want to do. I want to do that." I had no idea. I was stupid.
So you were at Fort Dix, and then where did you go for training after that?
I went to Fort Benning for jump school, and then Fort Bragg, North Carolina. That's the John F. Kennedy started the Green Berets. He changed over what was in the World War II. It was OSS was Special Operations, and then it changed over to Special Forces, and he made it Green Berets, so they got permission to wear berets instead of their regular hats. So the center is called the John F. Kennedy Special Warfare Center. It's about special warfare.
Cool.
And so that's where I went. I went to Fort Bragg, North Carolina.
And then after training, where were you sent?
It's interesting. The training is 3 phases. And the 3 phases of training is phase 1, and then your specialty. Everybody does phase 1. It's all basic Green Beret. It's indoctrination about Special Forces. And you go out in the field and, you do all this stuff. Plus you jump. And then you go off to your specialty training. So the medics would go off for a year to Fort Sam Houston to become medics. They're like mini doctors, and other guys would go off to different places. I stayed right at Bragg and did weapons because we had the artillery ranges and the weapons ranges. And then after your specialty training, you come back as a group and you finish phase 2. So it's really 3 phases, but it's called phase 1, phase 2. And then that's when you do your real hardcore training of actual live fire, and they have enemies trying to hunt you, and they were from Vietnam. They were special forces Vietnamese soldiers that were playing the enemy at Fort Bragg. And if they captured you, they tortured you. So the whole idea of special forces is they want you to quit. So they do everything they can to make you quit. If you sign your name on a piece of paper, it's like I sign my name as I would, if I was captured as a prisoner, I would sign my name saying I was a criminal or I did something wrong. And so if you signed your name, you were kicked out and you were sent down the road to the 82nd Airborne Division. And then you went to Nam with some airborne unit. Mm-hmm. So when I came into Fort Bragg, there was 177 of us. 2 years later, there were 11 of us standing. That's how many quit. Oh, some got killed. People get killed in training or get really, really hurt. And so I was a highly trained special warfare soldier that could go anywhere in the world and do anything in a clandestine type operation. My MOS was light and heavy weapons and communications. And so when I graduated, they sent me to the 7 there's different groups of special forces all over the world. Special forces even today, right now, you don't know it, but they're in every continent, very secretly. They're in Africa. That's why you just hear that, 2 Green Berets just got killed in Africa. Well, yeah. They're in Africa? What are they doing in Africa? They're in Asia, they're in Europe, they're in South America. Matter of fact, it was the Special Forces that took down Che Guevara. Oh. It was the 3rd Special Forces group. So there's the 1st, there's the 3rd, there's the 5th, the 6th, the 7th, and the 10th. And the 1st group is in the Philippines, 3rd group was South America, 6th group was Middle East, 5th group was Asia, which was Vietnam. So that's this flash. Everybody has a group flash. That's that flash. The red flash was the 7th group, and 3rd group was a double flash. Anyway, I got sent to the 7th group, and then 2 weeks later transferred to the 6th group, which was still at Fort Bragg, but it was in a different part of Fort Bragg. And our area of operation was the Middle East, so I was destined to go to Lebanon. But I had put in my volunteer for Vietnam, because everybody wanted to go to Vietnam. It was part of what you were supposed to do. You were expected to volunteer for Vietnam. So I was in the 6th Special Forces group, having fun, jumping out of planes. I was on a testing committee, testing brand new chutes, and I had a blast. Yeah, they had experimental chutes, and 4 of us were testing them every day, and I was just jumping out of planes 5 times a day, having a ball. And then my orders came in, and it said 5th Special Forces group. That meant I was going to Nam. So after 2 years, and here's the interesting thing, guys that got drafted were coming home, had already gone to Nam, went to basic, went to advanced infantry training. That was it. That's all they had. They were really undertrained and green. Went to Vietnam, half of them got slaughtered. And then they came back and spent a little time at a fort doing something else, and then they got discharged. They were getting discharged out of the Army, and I was just finishing up my training. So it shows you how much training I had. And I went to Vietnam, and I spent a year in Vietnam.
Okay.
And I was also a ranger.
Could you talk a little bit
ranger.
about that?
That's back at Fort Benning. After I graduated, you could take and go to any school you wanted, so I went to ranger school. I didn't have to. You can be a ranger and not special forces. You can be a ranger and not airborne. You cannot be special forces unless you're airborne. But you can be all 3. You can be airborne, ranger, and Green Beret. It's all 3 different things. Okay. Airborne, you jump out of planes. Ranger, you do recon. Special forces is what I just told you. Yeah. I was all 3.
So once you're in Vietnam, would you describe like a day in the life when you were there?
Well, a lot of it was really boring. The one thing that hit me was the temperature when I first got there. It was really, really, really hot. It was 104 degrees and humidity. It's tropical. But that was down south where I landed. And then I went up to Nha Trang, where the 5th Special Forces Group headquarters was. And when I was there, they were asking for volunteers to fill out the ranger units on all the different divisions. So 6 of us volunteered. Again, we were just volunteers. We volunteered for the Army, volunteered for Airborne, volunteered for Special Forces, volunteered for now. We were just raise your hand, dummy. So we went up and we got attached to a ranger company. That's all they did was recon for the 101st Airborne Division. And so our day would be, if we were going out, our day would be consisting of getting the mission that we were going to do, going out and flying over that area, because you'd fly over, it's 1,000 meters by 1,000 meters is a grid square, and we'd have 4 of those to cover. So when you went into the ground, you had to hike and cover 4,000 meters. You never made it through the whole thing, but that was your job. You'd fly over and look at the area, and then pick a couple of potential landing zones, go back, inform the team this is the mission, because all missions were different. And then you'd gear up, you'd get all your weapons, you'd get all your hand grenades, all your ammo, your food, because we carried 70 to 80 pound rucksacks on our back, plus another whole pistol belt full of ammunition, which was probably another 20 pounds easy, and plus your weapon. So you were carrying around 100 pounds of, because you were just by you're out there for a week. You had to bring enough food and water for a week, 5 days, and you had to bring enough ammunition in case you got in trouble. So I carried. So anyway, we would get all our ammos, get everything ready, and prepare for the mission. Then we'd do a briefing, say what the mission was. The mission we were very, very specialized, so we could just do reconnaissance. We didn't know what was there, and we were going to go find out. Or they knew there was troops in there, and they wanted to know how many, where were they, go see if you can find them, get a head count, and then we'll send in the infantry, or we'll do whatever to them, Or they know specifically that there's an underground complex there, because they had tunnels. Could be a hospital, it could be a pay station, could be whatever. They wanted us to go and find that. Then the other one we did was the missions were sometimes, this was like right away. This was emergency rescue. Pilots would get shot down. Helicopter pilots, jet pilots, there was all kinds of aircraft in the air, and they get shot down, and we'd go in and rescue. We'd go rescue the crews. So that could be really sketchy because you didn't have a whole lot of time to prepare, and secondly, a lot of that time it was in the other country. It was in North Vietnam or it was in Laos. So they couldn't send conventional troops because we're not supposed to be in those countries, but we always went in there. We were always in Laos and always in North Vietnam. We were doing sneaky, way deep in enemy territory. So they would send us, and the final thing, which was the most dangerous, was a prisoner snatch. We would go in knowing there was a high-ranking officer with a group of, like a company or a platoon, and they were in this area, and we knew exactly where they were. We had done the reconnaissance, and we were going to go in and snatch him, bring him back for interrogation, and do the others in. So you went in with 2 teams, 5 guys and 5 guys. 2 teams was a heavy team. That's 10 guys. That's a little bit more. Your chances of survival are a little bit more than 5 guys going against 30 or 100. So that was a prisoner snatch. And that was pretty interesting because oftentimes we'd have a couple of Vietnamese or Montagnards going with us. They had indigenous personnel from Vietnam. And so they spoke the language. And they would wear enemy outfits. And we'd be behind them, heads down, and walk right into the middle of the base camp. And they'd, and they're talking to the Vietnam. The guys are all sitting around eating rice, and all of a sudden, got them by surprise.
Wow.
And we knew pretty much where the prisoner, the guy we were trying to snatch was. Didn't always work out, but usually
So what was the hardest thing about adjusting to life over there compared to here?
That's a really good question. I think, first of all, it was the weather, the climate. The fact that people were trying to kill you was a real adjustment. It woke me right up. As a matter of fact, my anniversary of my first mission was January 1st, 1970. And we went in the night before on New Year's Eve. And the next night we were completely surrounded by a company on the top of a hill. We were on the top of a hill. We were completely surrounded. We had 10 guys though. And for 3 hours it was a firefight. And I was the one that initiated the contact. So it was my first combat, my first time I had to kill somebody. And I was the one that initiated it because he walked right down on me. And then we fought for 3 hours to get our butts out of there. So 1970, January 1st is always a target. You know, when it comes to New Year's, I never really liked New Year's. I've come to appreciate it now, but what was the question? Oh, so the other thing was the jungle. I think the hardest thing, when people think of Vietnam, they think of rice paddies, they think of villages. You hear, you know, platoon going into villages and women and kids. I had none of that. I was so far up north into, if it's like taking the Amazon and pushing it up into mountains. It's triple canopy jungle. That means there's a layer of jungle here, foliage, trees this high, a layer of jungle here, and then another layer of jungle here. So it's called triple canopy. It's so thick. This would be the first layer. Well, there'd be a low layer. But it was so thick and so dense that it was dark in the daytime. And there was ground fog it was always misty. So it was very spooky, you know, it was like mist on the ground. It was dark and moist and it was hot and jungly outside, you know. And when I first came into country, it was the monsoon season, so it just rained for 4 months. Poured. So I was freezing in the high mountain jungles. You know, we're above the clouds half the time. And it was freezing because all we had was fatigues. And so I had a hard time adjusting to the jungle, to the snakes, to the bugs, to everything. And the mosquitoes and the ants and then after a year, I felt so comfortable that I felt more comfortable in the jungle. So to go back to it, I never had to worry about women or children or village or even Viet Cong. You know, there were 3 different types of enemy. There was the Viet Cong, there was a local Viet Cong, there was the hardcore Viet Cong, and then there was the NVA, which was an army from the north. 3 different outfits, but they all worked together. All we fought was the NVA, the army that came down from North Vietnam, North Vietnamese army. They had helmets, they had guns, they had fatigues, they had tanks, trucks. They were an army. That's who I fought. I didn't fight local VC who was a peasant during the day and tries to blow you up at night, and he's a farmer during the day and he shoots you at night. That's a local VC. And then the hardcore VC, they traveled all around South Vietnam, but they were from South Vietnam and they were trying to overthrow the government. And then you had the North that was trying to unify the whole country, which was Ho Chi Minh from Hanoi. That's who we fought, because where I was right along the Ho Chi Minh Trail. That's where it all came down and infiltrated into South Vietnam. And our job was to, you know, look at the Ho Chi Minh Trail, take pictures, count heads, see what type of uniforms they had, where they were headed, that sort of thing. So there was a lot of them. It was 5 of us. So our job was reconnaissance. But I didn't have to. If I was out, I was so far away from any friendlies. 30 miles closest was the nearest friendly, that if I banged into somebody, it was an enemy. I didn't have to worry about shooting first and asking questions later. Whereas if you're going in a village, you're infantry, and there's a kid, and they're trying to figure out who's who in a zoo, you know, that was horrible for them. For both the villages and for the infantry. I didn't have to worry about it. So I didn't have any of that psychological, is this kid going to blow me up with a hand grenade or something like that. And a lot of guys had to go through that, you know. And I never stepped foot in a rice paddy. It was all triple canopy mountainous jungle. So that was an adjustment.
Yeah, I bet. So I've heard you tell stories about fun times you had over there. What was your favorite, like, happiest memory?
Oh my goodness, there's so many. We were terrible. We did awful pranks. But first of all, you get so close to these people that you live with and fight with for a year that they become closer than any family member you've ever been. And I mean that sincerely. They're like you would give your life for them. They're like a brother, And you also know them inside and out. You know their weaknesses. You know their strengths. And this one big guy who was a friend of mine from Ohio, his name was Randy Oswald. Big gentleman farmer from Brookville, Ohio. He was huge. By the way, all Green Berets were supposed to be 6 feet. I am not 6 feet. And so I was called Peanut. I'm not that small, but compared to these guys, I was a midget. I was tiny. But I got a waiver because I had such high scores on my physical training and on my battery exam, which is intelligence. Don't ask me how. But so I got a waiver, and then I was able to go into special forces. So these guys were all big. Well, Randy was petrified of snakes. He was in the wrong country. And we were up, for some reason, we were doing a radio relay, because when these teams are in the field, you had to have communications on high points. Because if they're down in the valley, they can never reach the back. So they're out of communication. They can't say, help, we need help, or I need a gunship, or I need medics. So we would be up high, and they would relay to us, we'd relay to another mountain, and it would go back to the Rio. So it's called a radio relay. You could have 3 or 4 of them all the way back to Rio, because like I said, we're way out. So we're on this radio relay, way up on the top of this thing, but it was on this mountaintop, and it was a fire base that was manned by all Vietnamese soldiers. So we were the only Americans, 3 of us. Mm-hmm. And they had, one of these Vietnamese guys had a pet python. Boa. This thing was about 12 feet long, but it was a pet. They were very gentle, I guess. And he was on the phone talking, he was on the horn. It was a radio. You had to press the mic to talk, and then you released it, and the other guy talked to you, and then you'd press the mic to talk, and it was like a one-way. It was a 2-way radio, but you couldn't hear them if you had the mic down. Mm-hmm. All they heard was you. And so he's talking. The company commander, the captain, is flying around in a helicopter somewhere up above, right? And he's on the radio talking to the captain. They're talking all professional. Yeah, breaker 19. This, cowboy. This is Dallas over here. We got so and so doing this, and the captain is giving him stuff. And I sneak up behind him. I give this guy a carton of cigarettes to borrow his snake. And I walk up behind Randy, and in the meantime, my buddy, there was 3 of us, he's in front of him, he's got a camera. He loved taking pictures. He had this beautiful single lens reflex film, but it's a beautiful camera. He always had it around his neck. And he's up there, and he's standing on top of a bunker, and he's talking to the captain, blah, blah, blah. And I sneak up behind him, and I just put this thing over his shoulder. And the mic goes, and he squeezed it. He starts swearing. I'm not going to swear. And get this thing off my head. What doing it? And the captain's up there going, what? What'd you say, troop? You talking to me? Because he's swearing at the captain. With a smile, Randy. And we just left him. You want to go get something to eat? Yeah, let's go get something to eat. Get that thing off me. And the thing starts squeezing over, going around his arm. In the meantime, the captain's trying to talk to him. Broke the boredom. Oh, yeah. We did a lot of things like that. A lot of funny things. Oh my God. Yeah. It was a good time.
So what was there was your funniest memory. What about just the most heartfelt, memorable experience you went through?
Well, the hardest memory, and I could never talk about this until, just several years ago, I started doing therapy, and I went through what was called cognitive behavioral therapy, because you have what's called PTSD, post-traumatic stress syndrome. I didn't even know I had it, and I had all these symptoms like insomnia and rage and all this stuff, Anyway, make a long story short, one of the things that they do in that is they make you really go over an incident over and over and over again till it becomes just flatline. And the one incident that there was many, but the one, and then you once you've settled that one, you work on another one and another one and another one because there's so many traumatic events. But this one I actually wrote a play about. It was Nabo. I lost 6 guys, 6 friends. They were a 6-man team. They all got wiped out in one mission. And that was May 11th, 1970. I'll never forget it. And one of the guys that was on that team was a brand new kid that he found me in the PX. I was wounded, so I wasn't going out. I was walking around with a cane. And I was at the PX buying cigarettes or whatever. And he came up to me and, "Hey, I want to be a ranger." And I said, "Get away from me, kid." And this is like 18-year-old blue eye, right out of high school. And he wasn't a ranger. He was a pathfinder, which was another type of specialty training. Make a long story short, he said, "No, I'm going to be a ranger. I want to come be a ranger." I said, "Well, I get away from me." He's like a puppy dog. "Hey, shoot yourself. You want to be a ranger? Get in." He jumped in the Jeep, and I had a driver in the back. I took him down, introduced him to the captain. I go, "This guy wants to die. Here he is. He's a dummy." And two days later, he comes diddy-bopping down the company street with his duffel bag, and just as green as could be, just the sweetest kid from Illinois. And for some reason, the captain needed to send people out on a mission, and they didn't have enough guys because I was down, other guys were down, but they had to send teams out. So they put together this team of all inexperienced except for 2 guys. So it's 4 inexperienced people and 2 veterans. And we fought that captain. It's suicide. You're going to send these guys out slaughter. Blah, blah, blah. I don't care. I got to send them out. Orders is orders. So I spent the whole night giving him all my gear, trying to teach him everything I knew in one night. This is what you do. This is how you walk. This is what you do. Blah, blah, everything. I was just up all night trying to teach this kid. He had my gear on when he went out. Had my equipment, everything. Anyway, when they went out in the field, someone fell asleep on guard duty. And the way we used to do guard duty is we'd set up what's called a wagon wheel, where all the rucksacks are in the middle. We'd put them all, button each other. And so you'd lay with your head to the rucksack. So your feet are all going out in different, so you're 360 covered. So this would be all the rucksacks. Your feet would be going here, mine here, here. It's called a wagon wheel. And then out there, you would put 2 claymores, your 2 claymores. And he'd put 2 claymores, and this one 2. So we have 2 claymores. Those are anti-personnel mines that you can hand blow up electronically to protect you. And they blow out that way. Wipe out anything 6 feet high for 100 feet. It's a really dangerous weapon. And so you put out all your claymores, you bring the wires back, you have the clickers right there by your side, you have all your weapons, and then your radio is in the middle. 2 radios per team. The team leader and the assistant team leader carry the radios. They're the ones in charge. And you'd pass the radio around because you have to stay in communication with the rear every half hour. So you would just squelch, go, ksh, ksh, say you're okay. Ksh, you didn't want to talk. There was no talking out in the field. It was all whisper. The only people that were allowed to talk were the team leaders. Everybody else had complete silence for a week. All hand signals. Make a long story short, because I have verbal diarrhea. You have to stay awake for an hour, every shift. But the first half hour, first 15 minutes, the other guy that just was on guard duty wakes you up, makes sure you're awake for 15 minutes, then gives you the radio. Then he goes to sleep, so you're awake for a half hour by yourself. Then you wake up the next guy, he's awake for 15 minutes with you, and then you give him, make sure he's awake, and then you go to sleep. Somebody fell asleep. Nobody was protected, and 3 NVA had been following them. And so as soon as they realized they could do it, they threw in 3 hand grenades into the circle and then emptied their AKs, which are 30 rounds apiece. So they sent 90 rounds into the perimeter. That's 90 bullets 3 hand grenades. So anybody that didn't get killed instantly, they killed. And then they take all the gear, they strip them. And so we lost contact. And somebody woke me up and said, they lost contact. And I said, what do you mean they lost contact? Why didn't somebody tell me, because we'd go out in a bird and go get them, So we had to go out the next day and find them. And that was really horrible because I felt responsible that was my fault that he got killed. They shouldn't have gone out. You don't do that. You train them first and then you let them out. So that was really a hard one to swallow. And for years afterwards, every time May 11th came around, I just got really drunk or whatever and just was a miserable person to be around because it was a horrible date for me. And then I wrote a play, and it was called Nine Ball, and we opened May 10th, 2001, and it was about this. It was about a lot of things, and I got a phone call May 11th that my granddaughter was born. So Maya was born on May 11th, 17 years ago, 2001. And so May 11th became a beautiful day for me. And I don't think it's any, I had 6 children. I don't think that's a coincidence. I replaced every one of those guys with a human being. Because they couldn't have kids after that. Some of them had kids, but anyway. Goes full circle.
Thank you for sharing that.
You're welcome. It's very hard to share, but I'm able to talk about it now.
Yeah, which is really wonderful.
But I have a beautiful granddaughter who's going to be 18 in May 11th, graduating high school. So.
Ooh.
And she's a ballerina. She just was the lead in the Nutcracker. Not proud.
So, moving more into your post-military life.
Yes.
Why did you leave the military?
That's another good question. If you look at these pictures, right? See all those stripes, and these and hash marks. This is 6 months. Each one of those is 6 months in combat. So my buddy Butchie Mara had done quite a bit of combat. I had 3 stripes, and I had 3 years. The other arm has slash arms this way, and then the other one I had 2 marks. That's 6 months, 6 months, that's a year combat. When I came back to Fort Lewis after I was not discharged, I was, my time in Nam was over, and it's called DEROS, so you go home. Date expected to return overseas, DEROS. It was a year to the day that you went over. I got an early out, so I went over there on December 7th, 1969, which was Pearl Harbor Day, and I came back November 11th, which was Veterans Day, 1970. And when I got to Fort Lewis, they offered me the world because they had spent so much money training Special Forces. I'm talking millions, to train Special Forces. 2 years of training isn't cheap, Not to mention all the jumping out of planes and what have you. So they offered me another stripe because I was a sergeant, which is 3 up and 3 up. That's a buck sergeant. Another stripe, I would have been a staff sergeant. That's a rocker underneath. They would have given me a $10,000 bonus. Yeah, to re-up. Another stripe, so I would have gotten more pay because the higher you go, you get more pay per month. I could go anywhere in the world, go to any place. I could go to Germany, Italy, whatever they were, Special Forces. I could go train anywhere. I could go to language school. I could go to Hawaii, anywhere I wanted, if I re-upped for another 6 years, which is 3 years active, 3 years inactive. I had just spent a year fighting and having people shoot at me. I had a lot of combat missions. I had a lot of trauma. And I said, nah, I'm done. I want to go home. So I said no. And before that, before I went to Nam, I was having a ball. I wanted to make the Army my career. I was having so much fun. Shooting all these guns, I'm jumping out of planes, I'm driving in trucks, in helicopters and jets, and with all these buddies, and the food was great, you know, roof over my head. I wasn't inland. You know, all it takes is a year of somebody shooting at you when you realize this isn't for me. I thought I was tough. I wasn't tough. I was a big baby. I was a big emotional gush, you know. That wasn't me, you know. So I went home, and that was tough. You spend a year in a jungle, and then you go home, like 3 days later. You're in a supermarket. It's like there are no fat people. I mean, fat people in Vietnam. They're all peasants, skinny. It's a third world country, and all the guys are humping the boonies. You're not, you know, lean and mean, you know. And I had spent a year in the jungle, go in the bathroom in the jungle. There's no toilets, there's no light. There's the absence of light. So at night, when the sun goes down, the old expression, you know, see a hand in front of your face, you can't see the hand in front of your face. I used to do this. I used to go like that. Couldn't see my own hand because there's no light. There's just pitch black. It is the weirdest sensory thing to look around and not be able to see anything. Knowing that they're out there and you're in the middle of the jungle. So anyway, when I first was moved from my unit down to, you flew out of Cam Ranh Bay, Saigon, you know, Ton Son Air Force Base. It was this cush Air Force Base. They had bunks, they had barracks, they had big fat mattresses on their bunks. You know, we slept on the ground, in the rain, in the mud, you know, and, you know, they had what's called hooch maids that came in and did their laundry and shined their boots. They had these beautiful mess halls, beer halls. They had Saigon. They had Mustangs with surfboards. They went to the beach and did. I go, you guys know there's a war going on? It's really bad out there, you know. And I went into this latrine, and there were all these toilets, and I just stood there for like a half hour, just flushing all the toilets. I went flush, flush, flush. I'm turning on the faucets. You know, we didn't have running water. You know, we had these outdoor showers that had these big you know, like they look like a propane tank above it, but they weren't hot unless you lit a fire under them with these kerosene. Nobody bothered doing that. It was just too much trouble. So we had cold showers. You know, we had outhouses. And back in the rear, we had outhouses. So it was a wooden bench with a hole in it. You know. So when I went back to the world, we called it going back to the world because we felt like we were out of the world. When I went back to the States, I was a fish out of water. I had no way of coping with everyday life back in the city, back with my friends who didn't really know me anymore, and I didn't know them, and they had moved on. Some of them got married, some were in college. I had a guy come up to me. Now, I've been away for 3 years, and I've been through, I can't even explain, I'm trying to do this in 30 minutes. The experience that I went through day to day to day, it could fill a book. And I went back and I used to hang out at this corner called in Wyoming Square. So I went to the corner, you know, go up to the corner, see what's happening. You know, it's a big square and tough place. And this buddy of mine from I graduated high school with, he comes walking up to me and he goes, "Hey, howdy boy." He goes, "What's up?" He goes, "I haven't seen you around the corner lately. What have you been doing?" And I was like, how do you answer that? You know, it was so weird. Haven't seen you around the corner. He had no idea where I was or what I was doing, and neither did I know any. I didn't know half the guys that I graduated with went to Vietnam, and we were at our 50th high school reunion. They go, "All the Vietnam vets stand up," and all these guys stood up and went, "You're now? You're now?" Because we never talked about it. So I said, "I just been around. You know, want to go get a beer?" So bizarre. So I had a real hard time adjusting.
And it was probably hard because there was so much controversy around Vietnam too.
We
right?
weren't welcomed. You didn't tell somebody you were a Vietnam vet because they would look at you like you're a baby killer, or you're a drug addict, or you're a freak. You know. I was a really good soldier. I was fought honorably, didn't do anything that I be ashamed of, and came home and everybody treated you like dirt. So it wasn't. I didn't want to even tell anybody I was in the military. Took my uniform off, never put it on. Just hung it up. Sid Hashin, who was the drummer for the group Boston, was a very dear friend of mine. We grew up together. And he was a rock and roller. You know, he was the drummer for Boston, and they were a rock band. And he played drums in high school, and he went into the Army. Is that you or me?
Me.
He went in the Army and went OCS. He was an officer, and he was an officer, second lieutenant, then a first lieutenant in the 4th Infantry Division in Vietnam. And when he was over there, he'd tell everybody, I'm going to be a rock star in 5 years. Yeah, LT, lieutenant. Yeah, lieutenant, sure, yeah. He goes, no, I am. I'm going to be a rock star in 5 years. And he was. But when he was a rock star, Tom Schultz, the leader of the band, wouldn't let anybody know that he was a Vietnam vet. They didn't want that associated with rock and roll. So nobody knew. He had this big afro, because he was Armenian. He had this big afro, played the drums like out of his mind, but nobody knew that was a lieutenant in Vietnam. Yeah. His daughter is married to The Rock. Wow. Lauren Hashin. They have 2 kids. Sidney called me up and go, Artie boy, he's dead now, but he's called me up and go, Artie boy, let's go over to L.A. We'll swim in the Rock's pool. Call me, Sib. I'll pack my bags. Let's go. Yeah, we're always busy.
So, how did you end up here? Now you're on Cape. You're doing theater.
Well, again, that's an interesting story. Huh? I was married. I married my high school sweetheart because we got engaged before I went to Vietnam. When I was over there, she just kept writing me about the wedding, and when you're in Hong Kong, can you pick up some dishes for the, our hope chest? And because I got her hope chest, got her an engagement ring and everything. I was never really in love with her. I'm in high school. I was infatuated, what's real love, So I thought I was, but it was just my high school sweetheart. It was like going steady. I gave her my ring. She wore it around her neck. And so while I was over there, she'd write me all the time, and I'd write to her. And then as the year went on, I stopped writing. I just, every now and then, I was just too busy trying to survive, and my head was messed up. And somewhere along the line, I just, this is not for me, So when I came home, she was already, we're getting married in April, and I'm like, hey, you don't know who I am anymore. And I wasn't in love with this person. I liked her a lot. I loved her, but I wasn't in love with her. So the week before the wedding, we went to Revere to pick up her wedding gown in her father's car. And we came back, and I'm sitting in the driveway, and the wedding gown's in the back seat. And I said, I can't do this. What can't you do? I said, we can't get married. What? It's all planned. We got 200-something people. It's at Hawthorne, Salem, more. Big, huge Catholic church wedding. I said, I can't. I'm not the same person you used to know. I couldn't get it through her head that I had changed drastically. I had some demons going on. I had some horror. I had some things to deal with. Anyway, we watched the sun come up in that driveway, and she badgered me that entire time, crying, cajoling, got angry with me, and made me feel guilty about all the people that were coming. Finally, I gave in. I said, all right, I just wanted to shut her up. Okay, let's get married. So, to answer your question, I did the best I could. I got married, and I'm going to make the best of it. But I'd look across that table at that woman, and I had 3 kids, And I worked my butt off. I went back to school, got all A's, graduated, became a counselor, blah, blah, blah. But my marriage was a mess. It was a mess. And I said, I got to do something. I got to get out of this business. So I got out of marketing, got out of the healthcare, and I bought an inn on Cape Cod. Not an inn. I bought a building that was on the corner of 6A and Willow Street. Big Greek revival sea captain's house in Yarmouthport. And I called it the Liberty Hill Inn and made it into a country. And I says, if we're working together and living together and the kids are down here in this beautiful house and this beautiful Cape Cod, it'll probably save my marriage. Well, I was divorced in a year and a half. Didn't work out. So I ended up, we had a vicious battle, and that was that. And she got the kids, she got the house, I got a suitcase. And I started working as a carpenter, banging nails. I didn't know anything about carpentry. I didn't know the difference between a hammer and a 10-penny nail. And I was hanging sheetrock in Barnstaple at another inn with, and I'm in this room all by myself and had a great echo. So I'm in there singing. I'm just singing away. I love music. I love 60s music. So I'm in there singing and I'm sanding the sheetrock and I'm getting dust all over me. I'm having a ball because I'm not worried about anything anymore, What am I going to do? I'm making like $7 an hour, poor as a turkey. And this guy comes in behind me, scared the living daylights out of me. He goes, hey, you got a nice voice. Oh, Jesus, I thought I was alone, It was Miles Corey, who ran the Academy of Performing Arts. He goes, I'm directing a play. I'm a director down at the Academy of Performing Arts. I'm doing a Gilbert and Sullivan. I go, Gilbert and Sullivan? Weren't they a folk group in the 60s? He goes, no, they wrote Pirates of Penzance. What? He said, go down and audition. Go down to this address. He gave me the address of Amy Fadley, piano player for musicals at the Academy. Just go down there and sing a song and audition, and you can be in the Pirates of Penzance, right? And I go, nah, that's not for me. Go ahead. So he talked me into it. I drove down there. I'm covered in sheetrock. I'm filthy. I've been working all day. I walk into this lady's house who was, Nancy Fadley. That's who it was, Nancy Fadley. Her daughter is Amy. Anyway, all these people are dressed to the nines. They want to get in the play. They're all dressed, and they got sheet music, and they're walking around warming up, and I'm going, I'm in the wrong place. I shouldn't be here. And she's sitting there at the piano. She's got a cigarette sticking out of her mouth. And she goes, you play any music? I go, no. She goes, well, here. And she throws a bunch on top of the piano, and right on top was Oh Danny Boy. I'm Irish. I sang Oh Danny Boy. 2 days later, I get a call. I got a part. I go down for the first rehearsal. I walk in. I had never been to the Academy. I didn't even know where it was. Go upstairs, walk into the arena, and it was like, I know this sounds corny. It was like, this is where I belong. I'm home. I love this. And I looked across, and sitting down was Mo. And I met Mo, my wife, and we've been married 28 years and have 3 kids. So that's how I got here and into theater, and I never looked back. So I did the Pirates of Penzance, loved it, loved acting, did the next show, and then I got leads, and then I went to acting school at Trinity Rep with Mo, and then we went out to California, and she went to graduate school, and I built professional sets at La Jolla Playhouse for 4 years, and became a professional set carpenter, and then came back here, and we had already been working at Cape Rep when we left, and when we came back, they had built the theater. We used to work in the outdoor theater, and the rest is history. I've been doing it ever since.
And here we are.
And here we are.
All right, well...
And it saved my life. Theater saved my life. That's why I want to do VETCO, to help other veterans.
Which is awesome.
It is awesome.
So, I think we're all set.
Are you sure? Is this okay?
This is fun? Yeah, it's perfect.
Do we have enough?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. This was wonderful. I'm glad I could help. Like I said, I can yak.